This video is brought to you by my new book, Genesis Saga: A Call to Aid. If you're craving a science fantasy adventure that's more in the spirit of Star Wars before Disney ruined it, then feel free to check out the links in the description. It's available in both ebook and paperback. Halloween is almost upon us. The happiest time of the year where all the ghosts and ghoulies are out and about getting free lollies. It's also the best time to indulge in some good old-fashioned horror media because no one thinks you're a weirdo around this time for enjoying Leatherface carving up some horny teens for committing the crime of having premarital sex while doing drugs. For me personally, I use it as a good opportunity to dive into some nice horror games. In particular for this year, I decided to do a horror double feature, taking a look at two horror titles that I actually do have some prior history with to see whether or not my opinion on them can be re-evaluated. So let's get this going with a game that I actually loved back in high school, but upon release gained a very notorious reputation. I'm talking about the 2008 Alone in the Dark. Back in high school, Alone in the Dark was one of the first games that I was actually able to buy for myself, and I got it at one of my favourite other times of the year, Boxing Day. What I got back then was a severely flawed experience that did show glimpses of brilliance that kept me entertained and coming back for more. Up until I reached a certain point in the game though. That point being where you have to explore the entire map and destroy every single root of evil. That was where I just noped out and where the flaws just became too much to bear. Now, thanks to the news about the upcoming reboot though, I decided to go back and revisit this. What could have been one of the greatest games ever made and relive all those glimmers and the flaws at once, except this time on PC. Which is so much more shockingly broken than the version I played that I am honestly flabbergasted that THQ did not delist this alongside Illumination. The first thing that struck out to me upon revisiting it was just how varied the gameplay was. This game is a Frankenstein hodgepodge of FPS, fixed camera angles, third-person perspective, directional melee and tank controls, and these all work for the most part, and they do allow the player to assess and approach situations in a variety of different ways. For example, if you're in a puzzle-heavy sequence with a fixed camera, you can snap to first person to better assess the environment, or use first-person shooting to incapacitate an enemy, then go into third person to drag them over to fire to finish them off. While each gameplay style does work at the core, they also bring their own bugbears that interfere with each other. For instance, the tank controls work fine in the areas with a fixed camera, but they don't work as well when you enter a free third-person area. Controlling the protagonist, Edward Carnby, then becomes a weighty chore as you struggle to get him moving in the direction you want him to go. Or how the directional commands for melee, they are handled with the camera input, making the camera unreliable to control in third-person areas when you need to fight something and using your gun isn't an option. I honestly find the directional controls for melee to be the worst offender, and if removed or replaced, would fix a lot of the problems, such as if it was replaced with a much simpler light attack, heavy attack, 1-2-3 pattern with some contextual prompts for finishing moves, or if they just implemented something similar to, say, Overlord 2, where if you move the right analog stick left or right, you move the camera automatically, but if you move it forward first, then you automatically begin moving the direction of your melee attacks. Something like that would just vastly improve gameplay across the board. Something else that stuck out to me was the fire physics. I remember these being great back in the day, and that is still the case. They have held up really well. Fire realistically spreads along flammable material in the environment and on weapons, leading to some unique puzzles and combat options later in the game. No joke, these are quite easily some of the best fire physics, if not the best, ever programmed, and you're in serious danger of burning your hair if you sit too close to the screen. The same though can't be said about the other physics in the game. They do work, and they allow the game to pull off some set pieces that honestly still look good, they just don't work as intended all of the time. The worst example of this would be in the driving sequences with the momentum of cars. where they can be outright stopped, like they've just slammed into a wall, if you so much as just barely clip something. And this can lead to failing what should have been an enjoyable set piece, followed by multiple tries, and the player just losing their patience. The story doesn't fare much better either. It's easy to approach if you're unfamiliar with the series. This is effectively a soft reboot featuring a seemingly immortal, long-time protagonist, Edward Carnby, who finds himself in a New York City as hell has been unleashed. Thanks to the seizing of a stone he was guarding, now suffering from amnesia, he needs to put a stop to the horror that's been unleashed. What drags this down is the dialogue and the voice acting. I think this exchange sums it up best.
What are you talking about?
You forgot. But not to worry. I still have the keys to your mind. Now give me my stone!
I don't have your stone! And fuck you anyway!
Yeah, conversations typically feel like they were written by a teen who was in his edgy phase, and the voice actors, they weren't bringing their A game. But easily the worst aspect of this game is just how bloody broken it is. The version I played on my Xbox 360 back in the day had its fair share of problems, I won't deny that. But here on PC, it is so much worse that I am, as I said before, flabbergasted it hasn't been pulled from sale. Upon installing it, I hit my first problem with my computer. It refused to run it. Why? Because it thought the exe file for the game was potentially malware, so the only way I could run it was outside of Steam and by playing it as an administrator. Every time. But that's not all. The issues with the physics were cranked up to 11 once the open world elements started to come in. As soon as I started driving my first car through Central Park, I suddenly found it thrown into the sky to die a slow death by fire because I had the audacity to run over a rock. Or the game forgetting I was in my inventory, so when I tried to leave, it actually locked the camera in there, actually trapping me in it. Then there was also the issues I had with capturing footage, where 2/3 of my videos were just empty black space, and the 1/3 was actually where the gameplay was, requiring me to render it out in an enlarged state. And on top of that, my last round of capturing footage for this game, which was also my last time playing it, wasn't of the game. For some reason, it recorded my desktop, so I actually lost all the footage of the bugs I just mentioned. Then there was also the problem with a certain puzzle where after I reloaded a save the next day, the game, for whatever reason, reset earlier parts of it, which soft-locked me between two literal pools of electrified death. And on top of that, every time I tried to access the graphics portion of the options menu, the game would scoff at my audacity and just crash. That was the cherry on top. Look, the 2008 Alone in the Dark is a bad game, there is no denying this. But the PC version in particular was so rotten that I couldn't bring myself to play it for the time I originally wanted to. But I still recommend people check this game out, just not on PC. If you can, play any of the other console versions, the Xbox 360 version, the PlayStation 3 version, or even the Wii version. The reason being is that there are genuinely good ideas here. Ideas that are fantastic, glimpses of true creative brilliance. And had this game gotten the extra time and development it clearly needed, it would have honestly been a classic people would still be talking about to this day. And it's because of that I still find it to be worth playing despite the numerous flaws. So if you can play those versions, check them out, but this version, do not touch with a 10-foot pole. Now let's move on to the next game, which I really did not like when it came out, Resident Evil 6. Now as for Resident Evil 6, this was a title that I was looking forward to in the lead up to its release. After being sorely disappointed by Resident Evil 5, I was hopeful thanks to how Capcom had promised that there would be something for every fan in it, spread across its multiple campaigns, so I was optimistic. Then I played it and found it to be a woeful disappointment, but In the time since then, I have gone on to reevaluate my opinion on Resident Evil 5. I find it to be much more enjoyable than the first time around ever since its remaster came out. So now I decided to replay some of Resident Evil 6's Leon campaign for this video and give it a fair go as well. Yeah. My opinion on Resident Evil 6 remains unchanged. It is a bad Resident Evil game. The reason why I decided to only play the Leon campaign for this video is because, out of all the campaigns, it was the one I looked forward to the most and was touted as the one that focused on what I actually want in a Resident Evil title first and foremost. Horror. But with that being said, I do want to get all the good points in this game's favour out of the way before touching on my one big criticism. First off, the campaigns are actually very varied. Each one is genuinely unique, offering different perspectives on the narrative and some takes on gameplay. You go through a wide variety of settings with varied rosters of enemies. The Leon campaign, while it's certainly not horror, is definitely horror-styled, as you mainly go up against crowds of rushing zombies. The Redfield campaign is the most action-heavy, pitting you against mutants that transform based on their injuries, and it plays like the ungodly love child between Gears of War and Call of Duty. As for the Mueller campaign, it's full of action as well, but it's stylized and features a persistent stalker enemy in the form of the Ustanak. Meanwhile, the Ada Wong campaign has a nice mix of enemies and is meant to be a throwback to the early days of the series with puzzles that require you to actually think. The PC port I played for this video was absolutely fantastic. It runs butter smooth, and not once did I experience any frame rate drops, stuttering, or screen tearing. Yeah, a lot of the texture in the environments looked blurry to high hell, making the finer character models stick out like blood on a bedsheet, but that's something I noticed all the way back on my original copy for the Xbox 360, so that's just a legacy issue, and thankfully nothing was botched upon bringing 6 to PC, where I dare say, it was actually more fun to play. Then there's the Mercenaries mode. This is without a doubt the best part of the game, and it's what kept me playing my old copy back in the day. A fun arcade experience where you're racing against the clock to take out all the enemies in a stage, rack up combos and high scores, while also keeping the clock topped up so you can actually beat the level. Here is where Resident Evil 6's more action-heavy gameplay really works. All the different ways you can fight back against enemies and maneuver around lend themselves really well here. Being able to do things like quick shots, shooting from the floor, and the melee system work great for keeping you in the thick of the action as you try to beat your last high score. More than anything, if Capcom tries to do another spin-off like Operation Raccoon City, which is something I genuinely want to see because I love the concept, even if last time the execution was lacking, they have a perfect blueprint for that potential game's gameplay right here in this version of Mercenaries. Now, it's time for my one big criticism of this game. The one that makes it not worth buying at full price at the very least and earns it all the shunning it has received over the years. Resident Evil 6 is not scary. There is nothing scary at all to be found here. When it tries, it just falls woefully short. It's obvious when something horror-like is about to happen, and it's too heavily reliant on action-based set pieces that undermine any potential fear factor rather than enhance them. The Leon campaign is the one that, bless its little heart, tries its hardest to be scary, but it just never hits the mark. It never nails the fear factor. Honestly, it's hard to be scared of zombies that are lumbering towards you when they suddenly slow down to let you shoot them, and you're armed to the teeth with dual pistols, a shotgun, a sniper rifle, plenty of ammo, healing items, and grenades. The other campaigns comparatively are too packed with action of different flavors to be scary. Even when they're not trying to be so, like with the Redfield and Mueller campaigns. Hell, the Mueller campaign actually tried and miserably failed to recreate the dread of Nemesis with the Ustanak, but it just doesn't work. Because every time he chases after you, you're in a linear hallway, in a chase sequence that plays like the last snowboarding level in Sonic Adventure, the one that puts the camera in front of Sonic, making it impossible to see upcoming obstacles. You know, the crap one. Objectively speaking, Resident Evil 6 is not a bad game, but it is a bad Resident Evil game and a horrible horror experience. There are great ideas here and things that I do like. Hell, before doing this video months ago, I actually did play a little bit of the Redfield campaign and I caught myself having fun. There's also the Mercenaries mode, and I can see why someone would get this on the Nintendo Switch for some mind-numbing action on the go. But as a horror game, it just fails on every level, and if that's what you're after, then I recommend you stay away from it. Instead, go play anything else in the series like 1, Code Veronica, 4, 7, or one of the recent remakes. They're guaranteed to deliver the action without screwing up the horror like this game does. Alright, thanks for checking out this video, I really do appreciate it. If you really liked it, by all means hit the like and the subscribe buttons, it would really help me out in the algorithm. Sorry about this being late, my time was divided between a lot of different projects, some related to Halloween, others related to my personal work as a writer, and, well, other YouTube stuff. But hey, better late than never, as they always say. Anyway, coming up next I'll have a review of Sonic Frontiers, then after that I'll be taking a look at the Callisto Protocol for Christmas. And I've also got 2 new books coming out soon. One's going to be a new collection of short stories, and the other is going to be an omnibus of all my work so far. I got all that and more coming up, so please stick around and expect some new plugs promoting my new work.